Grandpa was known to have the gift of healing. He had participated in other things, so he seemed to be able to have that gift given to him, that he could give people blessings and they get better.
So you're saying that we could just cut your nose too?
Yeah, and so what they were going to do, they were going to let me rest over the night, and then the next morning they were going to do some surgery to try to repair as much as they could. And so the next morning they came in to get me. They removed the bandages, and the doctor looked into my eye, and the tear duct system and everything was back in its place. Everything was whole, and there was no reason to do any surgery, and they released me from the hospital that day. And there's a little epilogue to this. That years later, when I went in the Army, you go through a lot of physical exams and everything, but I had an ophthalmologist. Is that the
Specialist in eyes, yeah.
specialist in eyes? But he was checking my eyes, and it was my left eye. And he looked into here, and he said, "Have you ever had an injury to this eye?" And I said, "Yes, when I was a little boy, I'd had an injury to that." And he said, "I want to tell you something." He said, "Whoever performed that surgery was a master surgeon." And those were the exact words that he used. And I said, "Amen." It was.
Wow. That's really neat.
There was another cousin that, this is Carol, known as Aunt Noni's daughter, that she's still alive out in Reno now, is where she lives. Anyway, when she was a little girl up Logan Canyon, she was flipping a marshmallow on the end of a stick or something that was really melty, and a piece of hot marshmallow went into her eye. And
It's tragic and somehow.
yeah, and Grandpa gave her a blessing, and I don't know all of the particulars about that, but her eye was okay, you know.
Great. Now, there's a couple
They dress it
stories
with
that
a
could be
graham
reminiscent
cracker and some
in,
chocolate.
Logan. Where did you get run over by the helicopter?
Oh, that was in Logan. I got ran over by a helicopter.
Let's just go on and on.
You know what my kids used to say to Karen? "Mom, tell us some of your stories." And she said, "I don't have any stories like that." I was with my friends. It was before we went to Florida, so I was probably first grade or second grade, something like that. And I had a bicycle, and us guys were riding our bikes up around the tabernacle someplace, and we noticed this helicopter sitting on the front lawn. I think it's the first time I ever saw a helicopter, and it was sitting there, and so there was a big crowd of people around it, and I think the military was doing a recruiting thing or something there, and so we were all looking at it, and there's a bunch of people there, and they said, "Well, we need a little help to move this over to the other part over here."
Didn't it have big wheels on it?
Yeah, it had wheels. They were about this big, but he said, can we get some help? And you know how kids are, they want to help with everything, and I couldn't find any place to push except on some kind of a brace just in front of the wheel. So I was pushing, and that thing ran up on my leg, and as it ran up, some people hollered, "Stop, stop, stop!" And so they stopped it right on top of my leg. And then they had an argument. Should we go all the way over? Or should we back it up? No, let's go over. No, let's back it up. You're going to break it if you do this. And finally somebody took charge. We're going over. And so they pushed it all the way over. And of course I was bawling all the time and in pain. But they looked at it and it looked okay. And you're embarrassed. And I just wanted to get out of there. And so I said, I'm okay. And so Gordon Dixon put me on his bike, and I don't know what happened to my bike, how it got home. One of my friends must have took 2 bikes down. It was only like 3 or 4 blocks from where we lived. And so anyway, he pumped me down to the house and nobody was there. So he pumped me over to Nana's house, which is, 7 or 8 blocks away, something like that. And they live upstairs. It's kind of like a split level thing, but you had to go upstairs. And I remember going in that door and kind of hopping upstairs, and my my mom says, "Who's that?" And I says, "It's me." I says, "I got ran over by a helicopter." And Mom says, "Oh, you did not." I did. I went in and pulled my pant leg up. She could see these big tread marks across my leg. I'm still there, so she believed me then.
I can't believe you didn't break a bone.
I know, I just-
Did you even tear skin, or was it just bruised?
It was just bruised and a big old tire mark that lasted quite a while.
I have to tell a companion story that will illustrate that my brother has these freakish accidents. And that's
As if we haven't heard
a
enough.
similar story when we were down in Florida. And we'd come back from church and we owned a Lincoln that had those suicide doors on there.
We were to the dentist in Melbourne.
Or was it the dentist?
Because I'd bought a baseball in town, and I had field boots on. They're like cowboy boots, and they come up high, and they have kind of a square toe and a heel on it, like engineer boots or something. Anyway, go ahead.
But we had been fighting in the back.
I was picking on him more than likely.
Probably was. So she had me move up front with her, and he was in the back, and I guess he got bored, so he put his boot over there and he rolled up the sock and was throwing it in the sock.
I was throwing the baseball in the boot.
Or was it the
I was
baseball?
practicing basketball, just throwing it in the boot, and get it, throw it in the boot, and
So
I'll tell you, he has a different viewpoint because he's watching out the back window.
That's right.
And anyway, I was leaning up against this door, throwing them in there, and I noticed that the window's whistling there, and I could see there's a little air through there, and the door wasn't totally closed. So I'm kind of leaning this way, and I go to open it to slam it, and it's that suicide door that opens into the wind, and it just sucked me out of the car just like that. Mom's going 60 miles an hour down a paved road, and I remember flying out, and the first thing I remember was my foot that had no boot on just went bounced up like that. I didn't feel anything, just bounced up in the air, and then I remember rolling through the weeds, and the weeds are just going like this, and I didn't think I was ever going to stop, and I stopped right next to the barbed wire fence. I got down and just stopped, and then I looked, and I could see Mom driving backwards down the road with that door flapping, and it's like she was going winding all that as fast as she could go, trying to get back to me. And I stood up and I fell down because I was so dizzy. So Mom gets close and jumps out of the car, and I stand up and I fall down, and she says, "Don't stand up, don't stand up, stay down, you might be," she's worried about a spinal or a neck injury or something. And I just kept, you're embarrassed, I didn't want to be. So I stood up and fell down about 3 times before she finally got me in the car and took me to Kissimmee to get x-rays, and they said, all I had was a skinned heel, and I kind of beat up.
Wow.
But you tell your end of it.
Dead about 50 times. That was ridiculous.
Well, when he went, we sucked out the car, I looked back and it was just sucking air back there, and I said, Mom, Dennis fell out of the car. And her famous statement was, "Oh, he did not." And she looks in the rear view mirror and sees him falling It was screeching stuff.
Yeah.
But what's interesting is that the only way I could account for, other than divine intervention, and I'm sure that must have been there, but the only way I can account for not being skinned all over the place is that Mom drove close to her side of the road, and down in Florida the sand is really soft, just right off the road. So I figured the only thing to hit the pavement was my heel that didn't have a boot on it. And Paul says he remembers me going down the road.
Oh, I did. I remember him just,
Wow.
Wow.
and I took you live.
Yeah, I did get hit by a car once. This is back in Logan, when my friend Kit Garr just lived across Poplar Avenue, and we were at conference. And I think I must have gone with his family, because Dad and Mom were home, or they maybe got home before me, but we were just walking home, and as we got out of conference, he says, I'll race you home. And he says, I'll go down to the end of the block here and over, and you cut across here. As well as all this traffic going back and forth, and I could see him just making headway on me, and I thought maybe he'll get hung up at the light, but then I saw it change in his favor, and I thought, I just can't stand here. So I looked for a little gap in the traffic, and I just ran as fast as I could. This car came along and hit me, and probably wasn't going very fast, and it knocked me down, and I jumped up and started running, and I remember some Mexicans that were standing someplace there over by the Tabernacle part, and they started hollering at me wanted to see if I was okay, and it scared me because it was in a foreign language, and I was still embarrassed, so I just took off running, and I made it home, and I didn't tell my dad anything, and the guy that
Would
hit
have made you
me.
study the edge of the road again. He was right.
And Dad, the guy that hit me knew who I was, and so he called Dad to see if I was okay. And Dad said, "Did you get hit by a car?" I said, "Yeah, I did." And you know what? He gave me a spanking. And I thought, man, that was enough to get hit by a car.
Did you win the race?
The road was it?
Yeah, did you at least win for getting hit by a car? Did you win
Did
your
you
race?
win the race?
No, he beat me.
No.
I mean, it was
You're all
terrible.
the-
But this, and it's all coming to me now, how this is a prelude to what I thought was a ridiculous rule that Dad imposed, and that was when you ride your bike in the downtown area, Logan, you cannot ride your bicycle across an intersection. You have to get off your bike
That's right.
and walk your bike across the intersection.
Well, I think that was a law in Utah.
Well,
It's a lot in many places.
I think, I think it's the law now in most places.
I
Yeah,
don't
we
know,
thought
but
it was dumb.
I thought it was ridiculous, and one day, I was downtown Logan, and I was on my bicycle, and I thought, I'm not getting off my bike and walking it across this intersection. I'm going through, and the light was for me, and I went through, and this crazy guy doing a left-hand turn off of Main Street, cut right in front of me and nearly hit me and screeched, came to a screeching stop. And I went back, I went on and I looked over my shoulder. It was Dad.
Oh, my
Did you get spanking?
I think that was blotted out of my memory.
I don't think he did. I caught it all the time, and he got away from it. He will admit today that since I was the oldest, I got asked to change the starter, to overhaul the starter, to get the generator off, to fix this, fix that, down in Florida at the shop, or do stuff, and he would go hide in the closet when Dad started talking about doing work.
That's why I can do nothing.
Oh, I tell ya.
So we need to hear the Donald Duck stories and the alligator stories.
Okay.
So, when
I
you're
know what to. Just shut your mouth. Shut your son. Shut your mouth. Just shut your mouth.
Actually, I'll have to learn how to talk Donald Duck better than me. But the way we learned was when we lived at Poplar Avenue with Grandpa and them, we'd go up and get in bed with him in the morning, and he would tell us stories in Donald Duck. And the story he always told us, once upon a time,
Oh, yeah.
and I don't know, I'll try it, because Grandpa always said he couldn't talk it as good after he lost his teeth, but he talked it probably better than any of us. But it was,
do ducks have teeth?
Once upon a time, when I was a little boy, I fell over my back on a sharp rock.
and it was once upon a time when I was a little boy, I fell right on my back on a sharp rock, and then you say, oh, and then you cry. And they told us that many, many times.
That's a good
And,
story.
I've lost the ability. On my mission, I was pretty good, and I would talk Donald Duck to the kids in the neighborhood. And pretty soon I would have you know, a dozen of them following me around. And you know what? Did you find this when you talk to the little kids and all that? Pretty soon they start wanting to hit you. They'll come up and start banging on you.
Where did you serve your mission?
In England.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So let's hear the alligators, someone with the alligators. And isn't there one with a snake that you're
Yeah.
running and
No,
have-
it's when you
Snake in the
stop.
door.
you stop?
Oh, that's right.
That's what that's.
Yeah, Robert the raccoon.
Okay, tell us some of the stories down in Florida.
And the Jeep disappearing in a hole or something.
Yeah.
It did.
Buried in a hole. We gotta hit those in
And the armadillo story.
armadillo story.
Well, isn't that the same
Yeah, isn't it the
Hey,
same?
Dad.
Well, part of
Can you
it.
check the thing? Just make sure we're still.
It's going.
Okay.
All right, so which one did we were supposed to tell
The
first?
alligator.
The alligator one. This,
Hey, wait a minute. I've got a doubting grandson.
where is he?
Let's see, which one was it? It's,
Wasn't it
It's Sam.
Sam?
Sam, I told this story to him. I
Is
told-
this Sam right here?
No, it's
Oh,
not.
that's Josh. Let me go find Sam.
But
Okay.
I told Sam the story up in Utah, and he said, Grandpa, he said, that did not happen. I said, oh, yes, it did. No, that never happened,
But
Grandpa.
didn't you start questioning after he questioned you?
Yeah, he did.
He
He called me and asked me if that really happened.
Sam is persuasive. Sam's got to become a lawyer. It happened this way. Are you sure? Did that really?
So we're.
Oh, wait, we
Sam's
gotta
not
get
here yet.
Sam in here.
All right,
Gotta
well-
have Sam.
He went to
Well, we'll tell the armadillo stories a little bit. Down in Florida, there's these armadillos.
there he is.
Oh,
Here's Sam right here.
okay,
Hey, Sam.
Sam, we're gonna tell you this alligator story so you know it's true.
In the mouth of 2 or 3 witnesses.
That's right. When we lived down in Florida, out kind of one of the swampy areas, if you ever dug a hole, they would put houses up on piles of dirt that they dig a hole to get dirt. There wasn't any mountains around to get it, so you just had to dig a hole, and the hole would fill up with water. And they put houses either on stilts or out in the Tules areas or on a mound of dirt. And so that's how these ponds got started, and they would just fill with water. And remarkably, they would have fish in them after a while. And there's no stream going in or out of them. And the trackers, the local natives, would swear, and they believed it, that it rained fish eggs. They say they would get taken up into the clouds, and then it would rain them over here. That's the only explanation they could figure. But probably what really happened is that every now and then it rained so much that the whole place would just kind of flood. And I remember running out, water would be all over the field, just, 4, 5, 6 inches deep from the rains. And so that's probably how they got traveling, but it's pretty remarkable even at that. But you'd have fish in there after a while, and turtles and frogs and stuff, and just great things for boys. And we would swim in this one pond that was made by the sawmill. It was a little bigger than the ones that they used for our houses. A little bigger, and they had a pump house there that would take water out of there to the sawmill in case there was a fire. They had a fire thing set up for it. So we'd swim in the pump house pond, and it was a good pond. We'd swim around, and one time we noticed that there was an alligator in there. And my uncle verified that it was about this big. And I always thought it was around 5 feet, maybe 4 feet, 4.5, 5 feet, but not a real big one, but a mouth big enough to probably take a finger or a toe off or something. So anyway, we were swimming in this, and as I look back, I feel pretty guilty because I was the oldest one and the leader of the crew, and by 4 years, and I had my little brother swimming with me in this pond, along with some neighbor kids that were littler, and one of them was just a year older than Paul, I think, but anyway, it was just our band of boys, and we would swim, and we noticed that if we swam towards the alligator, he would go down. And then we would tread around just, how you like to court danger. And then the alligator would pop up at the other end. And so then we'd swim towards it, and it would go down, and it would pop up at the other end. And so we'd chase that alligator back and forth. And my uncle says that, and I kind of mentioned that story. He says, yeah, and he says, I told you, I come by one time and saw you guys swim there. I said, don't you know there's an alligator in there? Yeah, but he's just scared of us. And he said, well, get out of there. And he told my dad, and my dad, he says, it took him about 3 times to get you kids, he says, to not swim in there. And actually, he says, the alligator moved down into another pond where we threw the trash in. And he said, you probably just ran him off. But I didn't know that until just the other day, that my dad even knew about it. I forgot about that. But one time I was treading around just really, scared about it and wondering where he was. And I had these boxer swimming suits on that had trapped some air that I didn't know. And I changed positions or something that bubbled up my back. And I thought that alligator had me. It was just like I walked on water getting out of there. Pretty scary. But anyway,
What about the Jeep?
the Jeep.
And armadillo.
Armadillo, holes.
Well, Paul, you tell this one.
Okay, well,
And I want to hear about Robert the raccoon too.
okay.
And Robert Barefoot.
Oh, yeah, that'd be me.
Well, one of the rodents, pests of the Florida area that we lived in were armadillos. And I'm sure all of you have seen them, but to me, they're among the most ugly creatures on the earth. But they would dig holes all over the yard that we had. They would. The cattlemen were always worried about the armadillos because sometimes the horses would step in the holes that they would make, and so they were just a nuisance. And so,
Not native to Florida. They came up from South America by somebody to let them get away.
yeah. But and so the topic at the dinner table, we'd have dinner. Our uncle and aunt lived across the road from us there. Uncle Ham was there, and we'd get together, and the topic was how in the heck we're going to get rid of these pests. So my dad and Uncle Ham, they would go out in the nighttime. They would come out a lot in the nighttime. They'd go out at nighttime in a Jeep, and one of them would drive.
Flashlight.
One of them would drive, and there'd be a flashlight, and one would have a shotgun, and they'd just go out and dispatch.
But he'd be sitting on the front fender though. And they'd drive around, and he'd be shining the light. He'd blast them with a shotgun.
Did you tell them how they were dressed? Or,
I don't know.
I don't know.
I thought you always said they were in their garments.
No, that's another story.
Oh boy, sounds like an interesting one.
Okay, but they, they were out doing their thing, and so it seemed like a family enterprise. And so I concocted my own idea of how to get rid of the armadillos, which was that I was going to trap them. So I went out away from the house, out in the boonies out there, and I dug all day long, digging a pit. And I dug a pit that must have been, I don't know, probably 4 feet wide and a couple of feet or so deep, And then I covered it all up with palmetto bushes and brush and everything.
Just like they do in Africa when they catch a lion.
Right. And so, and the days went by, and I'd go out and check every day, and there was nothing there every day. I'd go out there, and before long, I just forgot about it. Until one night, Uncle Ham and Dad were out doing their thing, and I was out there on the porch watching them. And they were driving the Jeep, and it was, reconnoitering all around the place.
And Ham's on the front fender.
And all of a sudden, I saw the Jeep lights disappear.
And that's when you shut the door quietly.
Went
And
back
I
to
heard
bed.
some cursing and swearing. And I quickly disappeared. It was one of those things that just immediately came to my recognition that, yeah, I remember. That's about where I dug that.
So was that
Digging holes, pushing tires up the hill.
was that Jeep? Was it like a World War II vintage?
No, it was a
Jeep?
station wagon Jeep type.
Oh, like a Wagoneer or something.
Yeah, like Wagoneer, only
Yeah.
early version.
Yeah.
I swiped the keys one time to drive it around when Dad wasn't around.
Uh-huh.
And just driving around, and I drove it out in this pasture and was driving around, and I got into a kind of a bog,
Uh-huh.
and I didn't have, boys like to find mud and then bog and get out of it, and so I put it in four-wheel drive, and I sunk the wheels down and spun them so bad that the whole thing, the wheels are just hanging there, and it was all high-centered, and I couldn't get it out. And boy, did I catch it from my dad, because they had to go get the big power wagon, they called it, with a winch on to pull it out.
Uh-huh.
How old was I then? Probably about 12, something like that, 13 maybe.
So what's the story about them being in their garments out in the Jeep
Yeah, what's the
driving
garment
around?
story?
You remember the garment story?
Yeah, well, they had, we had a real problem with wild cattle coming on our premises there. We had little fruit trees and they come out
Flowers and stuff.
and they just make a mess of the yard. And there would be like a herd of, 20 or 30 of them that would come out at nighttime. And so in the middle of the night, Dad went out to shoo them off,
It was a common thing that whoever heard it would go out and shoo them away. They'd hear them out there munching through the window, half open at night.
But he was, and so I remember watching him out there, but there was a big bull in that particular crowd that night, and it charged him.
Did it?
Yeah.
Oh, I could
Charged him, and all I remember was just a white streak running across, getting back to the house. He was just in his garment.
Well, there's another garment story that maybe you don't know about, on this same kind of thing. They heard them out there munching, and Dad or Mom gets up first to go out to get them, and the other one wakes up and hears them munching shortly after, and so they go out, and they both went around the house and met each other at the corner and scared each other half to death in their garments.
You guys have a garment
Yeah.
story?
Yeah.
Marie, you snuck in my house, like the back sliding door, and I'm kind of walking around my kitchen, I'm just in my garment, and there's Marie standing right there. That one on Sierra, with my split level house with the orange kitchen. Yeah. Yeah, you came in the door, of my sliding back door in the back. I did.
What about Robert the raccoon?
Oh, Robbie the raccoon?
Robbie?
It was Robert.
Okay.
His name. You want to tell that story?
I think you probably should.
On his birth certificate,
I
it's
don't
Robert.
remember particulars other than that Robert was the neighbors, Sowards, that moved in where Ham and Rosemary were across the way. They were our only neighbors there. And he caught a little baby raccoon, and then they kind of raised it, and he was real friendly. And
They were mean to him.
they were mean to it. The little boy from that
The little
family was
boys.
really mean to him.
Yeah.
And so we tried to protect him. And
Well, he just migrated to our house. He said, "The heck with this. We're not being treated well over there." So he came over, and I remember that he had a special attachment to Mom. I remember Mom cradling him in her lap. It's just this little baby raccoon, and he was sweet.
yeah,
He was a sweet little animal,
he was.
and he was attached to Mom.
He would get on our bicycle out there and run on the spokes and just get it
When it was
flying.
laid down.
Yeah, I think there's a picture of that actually in the album.
There could be.
Yeah.
Because I remember that image in my mind of him on the bike wheel with the wheel laid down on its side.
We had a raccoon come in. You'd see him now and then, and they would come in around there, and it was frothing at the mouth and kind of not afraid of you, kind of charging at you some, and it turned out it had rabies.
Yeah.
And the other raccoon story I remember is that we were chasing this raccoon, and it climbed up the telephone pole and got right up on top of the telephone pole. And we had Butch with us, and there's some Butch stories that
Yeah,
we
you
had.
guys gotta tell us.
Butch was the watchdog that we got for the sawmill, and he was half Doberman Pinscher and half German Shepherd, and a big, thick, mean-looking dog. And he guarded someplace, and they were getting rid of him, and Dad heard about it and went to get him because people were stealing stuff from around the sawmill. And so we put Butch with us, and he just bonded with us instantly. He didn't act like he was mean at all. And so he was really friendly to me and Paul and Mom and Dad, but he was really death on salesmen that would come in to the sawmill, and they put him on a big long guy wire that he could run from one end at night, from one end, well, no, during the day, from one end of the sawmill. They let him loose at night. And when he's on his guy wire, a salesman was coming up through the logging yard or something, and Butch came running out from underneath the sawmill towards him, and he just turned around and was backpedaling, I guess, and just fast as he could get away from his dog, and he fell over something, the log or something, and Butch just came to the end of his chain, just about this far from that guy, and Dad said this guy wet his pants. It was really a ferocious dog, and he would try to get through your window if he wasn't chained up on cars. They'd have to roll their window up because he was trying to get in through the window.
Oh my word.
And he would bite your tire and sink his teeth into it, and I've seen him many times get flipped around like this several times, till it came loose and run over his nose, but it was that soft Florida sand. He didn't seem to learn a lesson from that. And one time I had a friend, when I'd have a friend over, I'd say, put on my shirt so that he has my scent and he won't bother you. And this older kid came one time, older than my friend, he came as his brother. But anyway, Stephen Mortensen, he comes over and he said, oh, I don't need that, I'm not scared of that dog. And I said, well, you better. And so we went over to the sawmill, and Butch was chained up in his doghouse. And when he saw us coming, he went right for Stephen, and he hit the end of that chain and it popped it. And he put him down like that and went right for his throat, but he didn't bite him. And Stephen wet his pants.
Oh, yeah.
It was really scared me to death, and I got him back off of him, but he was a powerful.
What kind of a dog was it?
Doberman and German Shepherd mix.
Jeez.
Yeah.
What was a funny story is that when they went to the pound, I think they went into Orlando to find a good watchdog, and they went into the pound, and Dad asked, do you have any dogs here that would make a good watchdog? And they said, well, there's that dog over there, and he pointed to Butch, but he said he's really too mean, and you got kids here. He said you don't want to have him. And then they went on down the line looking around, and in the meantime, Mom had gone in and opened the kennel, and he was just like he bonded immediately to her, and it was Mom that actually made the decision. We'll take him, and
Wow.
he immediately recognized like he had been saved, from prison, and he just immediately bonded with our family, but no one else. I remember even Ham had some trouble with me.
Yeah.
But he was a great watchdog, and they just turned him loose at nighttime, and and all of the theft and everything immediately stopped. And he'd never run away. He was right there. It was his.
He's loyal.
He knew it was his job, and he'd be back there and get chained up during the day, but at nighttime he was wandering around.
Wow.
I started out with the raccoon up the telephone pole.
Yeah.
And it reminded me of Butch because we were trying to get him down, and Butch was with us, and I took a stick and was banging on the telephone pole, and it vibrated enough or scared the raccoon that it jumped off the pole and hit the ground. And as soon as it hit the ground, Butch was on him and grabbed him by the neck and just like that, he was dead.
Wow.
That was amazing.
Sounds like Butch might have had some experience with raccoon.
He did, he knew
Yeah.
what to do, boy. That raccoon never made a step partly, and he was on it.
Salesman.
Dad. Oh.
There's an interesting dog story though. We had, we got the call, we got Laddie,
That's what I was just gonna ask about.
and Laddie came to us at Christmas time, and there was a big box that Mom and Dad put under the Christmas tree. that was light and it was, just had sand in it, I think.
They didn't even put sand in it, but there was a little few grains of sand in it, which was all over Florida anyway. And there was nothing in this box, a great big one, and they told us how special this was. And we tried to figure it out, and I'd hear these grains of sand going back and forth inside of there. I just didn't know what the heck it was.
But on Christmas morning, we got up and we wanted to open that one the first. We just were so curious. But on that morning, it was very heavy. That, you know, there was something in there. And we shook it around a little
Don't shake
bit.
it, don't shake it.
We did, and we shook it, and then we opened it up, and that little collie, just like a jack in the box, just jumped.
Bark or
Yeah, he
anything
didn't-
in that box.
He just jumped out of there, and he
Licked our faces.
we just ran around the house, and it was just a joyful experience. But he grew up kind of being bullied by Ham and Rosemary's dog. Remember that?
They had a German Shepherd they named Teddy that was full grown, and he just bullied that poor little collie all over.
Was this before or after Butch?
Butch was
At
there.
the sawmill,
He
Durham.
was at the sawmill.
Oh, so this was at your house.
This
This
is
was
at our
our
house.
house, but Laddie grew up to be just a handsome, big, strong collie. And there came a day of reckoning that he put Teddy down. And there was never any trouble from Teddy again. And Butch respected
Yeah, we were always afraid that Butch would get into it. He'd try to come over to the house sometimes, and Dad would get a .22 out and shoot here and there and over his head and drive him off to get him go back to the sawmill. And we worried about the two dogs would get into it, and we always thought Butch would just kill Laddie. And they eventually did get into it, and Laddie whipped him 2 or 3 times. I couldn't believe it.
Wow.
He put him down, and Laddie could find snakes. Remember that?
Yeah, I was just
Well,
gonna ask about your.
I had a snake story with Laddie. We had a big 50-gallon drum out away from the house that we'd take our trash and burn it there. And one night I took the trash out there, and I was met by Laddie, who would not let me close to that barrel. I mean, he would growl at me, he would bark at me, I'd try to move around him. He'd jump up on me and push me back and everything. He would not let me near that. And then I looked over there, and coiled up at the base of that drum was a big water moccasin. It was just a big, fat water moccasin at the bottom of that. And that dog probably saved my life.
Yeah.
You gotta tell that other snake story.
Oh, yeah, I got a snake story. We were going out to our secret hideout. You'd go east up the road between the ponds and over a couple other roads, and then you're out in the high grass, and we'd go out to where there's this grove of oak trees. And oak trees, when they grow close together, make a canopy where the grass can't grow under it. There's just like a cathedral, a carpet of leaves under it, and we had vines we'd swing from, and there was an orange tree in there that we could eat off of, and a guava tree, and we just had a blast out there as kids. It was our secret hideout. So we headed out there one day, and I was in the lead, and we were running. We hardly ever walked anywhere, you know. We just kids. We were just running on the way out there, and it was just like a voice came to me and said, "Stop!" And I stopped, and Paul or somebody ran into the back of me, and we didn't know why I stopped. And I looked down, and there was this water moccasin coiled up right in the path with his white mouth open like that.
Oh.
If I'd taken another step, I'd stepped right on him.
Oh, my head.
And that is an exact duplicate, and this isn't made up of my dad, which I'll tell that one story, when he had an opportunity to go down to the beach after some battle, I guess, on Okinawa. And they were going to go down and go swimming, but they were in their full army stuff and his big boots on, and that's significant because he was in the lead going down a path toward the beach through the palm trees and stuff, and a voice came to him and said, "Stop." And again, people ran into the back of him and said, "What the blank are you doing?" And he said, "I don't know." And he looked down, and his boot was just under a tripwire, booby trap, and the wire, they followed the wire, and it went right up, and right over their head was a bomb that they had made. And so that's how close he came, but that exact thing happened to me when I was a kid on that snake.
Wow. I told that time in primary. That's a good,
Yeah.
that's a good one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That was a good one.
You remember the time that we went down to the canal to catch some minnows and those two water moccasins came out of the brush
Yeah,
behind us?
yeah.
We were standing side by side there, and the canal had kind of dried up, and there were just minnows in there, and
Crawdads and stuff.
didn't have a net.
Had a rake. We were raking them out, fish and stuff out of the bottom of this canal. It's like a big pond kind of, you know, they were trapped in it.
But as we were standing there, all of a sudden, two snakes, two water moccasins came right out of the brush behind us.
Behind us.
One crawled, I can't remember, between one of our legs and the other one over one of our foot into the
Back into the water.
back
Well, that was
into the
probably
water.
their refrigerator.
Yeah.
Well, it was.
What
I
missing in there?
don't think they, you know, but we got them, didn't we?
I think we did. We got a rake out and went after them. But they are aggressive snakes. I saw one chasing my dad. You know, we were shooting someplace and 22's target practicing, and the snake got stirred up and came after all of us. And my dad was shooting at it, and it was kept coming after him. I think he got it.
Huh.
Well, I think, were you talking about where we lived the very first place? We were out target shooting up against old sawdust bed. You remember that, where that sawmill was? And
That's where the snake came out.
yeah, well, we had been out target shooting and run out of shells. And we were on our way back,
That's
and
right.
that snake came at Dad, and he had picked up a stick.
That's right.
And he'd flip it back like that, and as soon as it hit the ground, it'd be right back after him. And he didn't have any more shells, and so he sent Dennis back to the house to get some more shells. But he had to flip that snake several times.
Wow.
Dennis got back with the shells, and he shot him.
All these things remind me of other stories. When the first house we were at was up on stilts, and it was a small little old wooden house, and the people that had it before had dogs under it, and that place was crawling with fleas. We just got bit up from one side down the other, and the funny story was that we had to hurry and go in down and get something to kill the fleas with, and so my dad laughed at my mom because my mom was telling the drugstore guy, she says, we got these fleas and they're just all over the place, and you got anything that, and she didn't realize she was just scratching like crazy killing fleas.
I can imagine that really bothered your mom. You wanted to have everything
Yeah,
perfectly clean.
there was another kind of oak grove not too far from there that we'd go out to, and this is when I was in the 4th grade, and we were out there playing around, and some kids wanted to go back to the house before I did. I think I was by myself, then I could hear them going back, and they hollered, "There's a rattlesnake, come quick!" And so just at that time, I saw a wild boar with tusks on it and everything, walking along through the place, and he was coming right towards me, and I had a hatchet. So I thought, I'm going to kill this thing if it gets up close to me. Stupid. And then I get a little bit scared, and they were hollering, "Come to this snake, it's going to get away." And so that was pulling me one way, and the boar was pulling me the other way, and my fear of what would happen. But I thought, well, if I hit him with a really good one right on the head, he probably can't do anything. And so he got probably as close as me and John, and discretion was the better part of valor, and I decided to go check on the snake, and I let that boar. I've always wondered what happened if I'd stayed there, because he was like, coming just ambling towards me. And anyway, they found a rattler, and it was the first big one I've seen. But they were about this big around.
Wow.
And I saw lots of them with guys holding them out like this, and as tall as a 6-foot guy.
Remember the one that Logger killed, that he put across the bumper of the logging truck?
You know, went over
And
one.
it hung down on both sides. It was so big.
Yeah, just monster snakes down there. And
Yeah.
so I had filled my pants. I didn't have anything. No, I didn't.
And you talk about those others.
I had stuffed oranges in my pants from this place. I had an orange tree in it too, and so I was taking them back to the house, and I got back to where the snake was, and one of them had gone to get his dad, and the snake was kind of crawling off, and I didn't want it to get away. So I was pulling these oranges out of my pants and throwing it at the snake. Every time I throw it, he'd kind of stop and coil up, and I kept it there by throwing these oranges at it. And then Wallace Brown came, and he had a gun, and he shot it. So, anyway, there were so many things in Florida that were just exciting.
How long did you guys live down in Florida? From what age to what age?
4th grade through 9th grade, so 6 years down there. One of my friends, Robert Justice, and they had houses spread around on the ranch to stop rustling, you know, and just keep kind of eye on things. And he lived about 4 miles from us, and I used to walk all the way to his house to play with him. But he was tending somebody next to his house. There were 3 houses in a row, and that's all it was out there. It was just 3 houses out there. And he was coming home from tending, and he saw a log that was between the houses. He didn't remember it being there, but anyway, he stepped on the log, and it turned out it was an alligator. It just took off out from under him. It was a pretty good size one, that one. But they had huge alligators sometimes that they would catch.
Anybody get killed down there while you were there with alligators?
One guy got bit by a snake and nearly died. That was, we call him Shimmy Shack. I can't remember why they called him that. It was something to do with his name.
Who was the guy that got bit by the rattler and he hacked off the finger or something that he had?
Oh, I don't know.
What part of Florida is this?
Central,
What area is it?
just south of Orlando.
Okay.
Yeah, kind
You
of.
were there for church ranch?
Yeah.
The church still has a ranch.
Yeah, the church still has
Is
a ranch
Kissimmee
there.
the closest place to it? Kissimmee?
St. Cloud is really,
St. Cloud.
it's between St. Cloud and Melbourne.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's where it is.
And your dad was asked to go down and help work on
Yeah.
the church ranch?
That's,
He was asked to go down and design and build and operate the sawmill, which became one of the largest operations in Florida at the time. It was huge. I have some pictures of it.
What kind of trees did they, were they cypress?
pine and cypress.
Yeah, pines.
The pine was not like we're used to. It was like lodgepole pine practically, kind of not very big.
And then you went back to Logan and finished your schooling there, and what's where you left from the missions on?
Yeah.
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 That's when their dad was feeling, had a heart attack or something. Is that what brought him back to Utah?
It was Grandpa, yeah, that's when he had a stroke. Uncle Howard, or Grandpa Rogers had a stroke, and they'd shut the sawmill down, and Dad was working at Cape Canaveral, and still living on the ranch. They were traveling in, which was about 35 or 40 miles, so they would wake us up just before they left, and we would try to get ourselves to school ourselves, and they shut the sawmill down, and so there wasn't as much to there. We had fasting and prayer. Dad wanted to stay, and Mom wanted to go home, and the answer just came, we need to go home. So we went back up to Logan, and
Is that when you hung around with like Atkinson and the Big Dixon boys? And I mean, I know you did when you were little too, but were they still there?
no, they had moved to Pocatello actually about a year before we went to Florida.
Oh, okay.
They had moved.
And you went to England on your mission, and I forget where you were.
I was in West Virginia most of it.
Do you have any memories of rockets
Yeah.
out of Cape Canaveral?
Yeah, we could see the launches from our house. You remember that?
Yeah.
There were, I mean, you could see the trail.
Yeah, you could see a big trail of fire going up in the air out over this one swamp by the pump houses where I remember seeing it.
Well, what do you guys think as far as time? Do we want to look at these pictures and maybe at the next reunion kind of pick up from, their teenage years?
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah.
I mean,
Are
I'm
these
just wondering
slides
about,
digitized
I'm just
in any
wondering
way?
about time, and we ought to talk about these pictures and.
Do we have digital copies of these
let's
slides?
do.
No, not yet. We need to get them converted.
We've got, if we think about it, we've got more stories that we can tell you about.
You were eating donuts or cookies or something in the car, and Dad told you not to eat it.
That was when I was eating cream puffs.
Tell that one, Robert.
I did earlier.
Oh, I was gone?
Yeah, you were gone, and I
So I don't
denied
know
it,
how
but
to,
he knew I
yeah,
was doing
maybe
it
look at
because I
what we
had
have
the
set
people
up
on my
here, just
nose.
because we're on
Do
short on
you want
time.
computer or you want these? These
Let's
ones?
do these.
Okay.
You wanna turn this off, or should we leave that on for some narrations of slides or something?
Yeah, we can do that.
Well, you know, I figured out what you guys are doing with having us do this. You think that we're losing it. And you better hurry and get it while we can still tell
We just
you.
miss each other. Did you tell the one of, was it your dad that was writing on the log?
That was Grandpa. I told that one.
Is that what it was?
Yeah.
Probably. Just making sure that one there.
Yeah.
Does it make sense
Let's
to
turn off the
do
lights.
this to record just to have it?
Mhm.
Because we won't be able to.
Well, you should do the
Okay,
video,
yeah.
almost the video from it, because then you can see.
I'm gonna take a still picture of it, so at least we have a digital copy.
Okay,
Okay.
all right.
Turn the lights off.
Yeah. Yeah, Karen, can you grab those?
Does that turn off?
Yeah, we can turn that off.
Oh my gosh.
That is cute. That's cute.
Okay, so who's gonna narrate this?
Whose slides are they?
These are mine.
This thing's making noise, so whoever's gonna talk, if you
Has
can't
to
keep
hold
it
it.
kind of. You wanna come and, you guys wanna bring those chairs over
Chair
here?
over there, Dad.
I'm just
We can just sit there.
But then you're together, so you.
Yeah.
Gosh, you were cute, didn't you?
Yeah. This is our house in Florida where, that's probably the corner where Mom and Dad met each other, chased in their garments. And that's, that barrel right behind you is where we burned the trash, I think.
Yeah,
Is that right?
yep.
And
Where's the barrel?
it's kind of that white thing in the back there with brown under it.
Can you kids tell who's who in that picture?
Yeah,
Oh.
the best is tall one.
Okay, we ready?
Yep.
Oh, look at my fine head of hair.
Tall hair.
For the kids here, make sure you tell them who's who in this.
But see the brush out there, way out
In the middle,
there?
that's Ellen.
That's where Dad and Ham would go driving their Jeep out there to look
the
for the
armadillos?
armadillos.
Now, and wait, and he's gotta take a picture.
It's okay, I already got
Oh,
it.
you got it?
Oh, wait. Yeah,
Look at Grandma's stylish lamp.
yeah, that was one Dad made her.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay.
That's the
Is that
my
Dad
dad.
right there?
Yeah, no, go back to the one that was upside down.
Is
Oh,
that Dad?
And
That's Grandpa Michelson.
Now, can you focus that, or is that just out of focus? There you go.
That's cute.
that plant right in the corner would put out a beautiful flower once a year. A big old stalk would come out. I'm sure we got a picture of it someplace.
Baggy pants were popular back then, huh?
Yeah,
That's inside your house.
yeah. And I've got that picture
We
still
got
in my
that
study.
picture, yeah.
And that table's at the cabin.
this to me is one of my favorite memories of my mom, her long, dark hair. And oops,
Oh, that's
Focus that.
Snapping Gertie. That's a lawnmower Dad made.
Oh, wow, look at that.
He had
I think we might have a jam here.
He had written Snapping Gertie on the side of it, and that's the lawnmower that I got my foot under, and I used to ride it around just for fun, and I would try to find boggy places to go, in the lawn, and I was out doing that one day, and I had my shoes off. And I was trying to pick the back wheel up. It was a three-wheeler thing. The back wheel's what made it go, and I was trying to pick it up and get it out of where I dug a hole with it, and I slipped, and my foot went underneath it, and the old blade goes on my toe. And Dad was pretty put out with me because I did that, and he had to stop, take me in the doctor, and get my toe sewed up.
I can't believe it didn't cut it off.
That's Paul.
Where was it?
That was it, Florida.
that was our carport out to the one
Is that a
side.
screen or the
Yeah.
door?
Yeah, behind us is a screen door.
We had a big porch that kind of went around about half around the house there.
Is this house still there?
Yeah,
Yeah.
Rosemary.
Is that Rosemary?
You see the lumber stacked up in the
Oh, wow,
distance,
yeah.
that's where the sawmill was.
Now, who are the girls?
Yeah.
Those are our cousins, that's
Laura Lee.
Rosemary's girls.
So that's your mom holding the little girl?
Yeah, that's probably
Rosemary,
Judy.
grandma's sister.
And the littlest, darkest one in the foreground is Deanne, and then the one behind her is Laura Lee. Oh, I bet that's Edna. That's Edna right there.
She's holding
This
it.
way I can do this right now because who knows if that'll ever actually happen.
I could take her.
Oh, this is a neat picture, I think.
That's cute.
Yeah.
These were the,
Danzies, I think.
then, yeah.
He's the manager of the branch, of the ranch.
You know, it's weird when you see an old picture that has older people in it. You realize these guys were probably born in the 1800s. You know? It's just weird to think what their youth was.
That's right.
And that's,
You were born in the 1900s.
who is that, Gordon? Is that Wally
Yeah.
Brown? And that doesn't look like Mabel as I remember, but it's Paul.
Yeah, I think was that Henry D. Moyle's son or daughter?
I don't think so.
I don't
I don't know who it is for sure. Rosemary would know. There's Uncle Ham.
Focus it.
Focus, yeah.
Is that it?
Yeah, he and Dad taught me how to box, and Dad would just teach me moves and stuff. He wouldn't hit me hard. Ham would hit me as hard as he could. Says you got to know how to take a punch. That was so I could fight the guys that were beating me up for being a Mormon.
Did you tell that story of you punching him on the bus?
No, I didn't tell
How
them.
old were you when you did that?
I was probably in about 6th grade.
Oh,
my
there's the Lone Ranger.
Yeah,
Is that Paul?
that's Paul.
Can you focus that at all, or is it?
There.
That's probably the swamp that we would have. Our friends would come and wake us up at 3 o'clock in the morning, and I don't know if you went with us or not, Paul, but they would get us up at 2 or 3 in the morning for 2 different times. I know we did this because we wanted to see if we could go out in the swamp with nothing but a candle in the middle of the night.
Well, that was the initiation.
Yeah, well, yeah.
Well, part of the initiation was to get into the secret hideout club.
Yeah.
You had to take off your clothes in the swamp and make it back
You had to
home.
make it home from our secret hideout to home with no clothes on,
Without anybody seeing you.
without anybody seeing you. That's the quartet Dad was in.
Is that your dad right
That's my dad up there. Needs a shape, looks like. And
there? 5 o'clock sound.
That's a lot, that's a Doug picture.
yeah,
Yeah.
Yeah,
It does
that's
look
what
like
that
that.
is.
Doctor,
It snows.
there's Ham washing his car.
He's got short shorts on
Yeah.
Who is that?
and
That's
very
Uncle
white
Ham.
legs.
He's hamming it up.
What kind of car is that?
Oh, this is cute. Is he a beard?
I think it was a fake.
Is that as focused?
Is that like a Halloween
Yeah,
thing?
looks like a Jewish
I don't know.
They had some kind of a church party.
Got some real palm trees.
Grandma really put some effort. I mean, these guys really.
Yeah. That's Ham and Rosemary and
Now, this is where we went to church, wasn't it?
Yeah.
That's the warehouse that we met in, sat on nail kegs and had a tin roof. And when it rained during church, you couldn't hear anybody speaking.
So it wasn't the same place where we went to church, Dennis?
no, that was different. The other place we went to church was the real church. Yeah, that's just a swamp.
Now, isn't that cool,
What
the
is
coolest picture?
That
That's
is
a
awesome.
road after it's been raining.
Oh, wow.
Can you focus? No, but what is that? Is that like some kind of boat or something?
No, it's a Jeep.
Car.
It's a Jeep. Yeah,
Wow.
it's not a Jeep, but it's a
truck.
A truck of some kind.
Yeah, there's a good story that Ham reminded me of. Dad took a couple of the helpers out, a couple of colored guys, and they were going through some place like this, and he got stuck. And he put it in four-wheel drive and still had a little hard time to get out. And Ham says the black guys got out and said, Mr. Mike, they call him Mr. Mike, the front wheels ain't turning. And he said, oh, sure they are. I got it in four-wheel drive. And no, they ain't turning. He said, yeah, they are. And they just get in. We'll drive out. So we drove on out of the bog, got home and found out that the drive line had been taken out of the front of that. It did not have four-wheel drive in it. But every time he'd get stuck, he'd put in four-wheel drive and drive right out.
The placebo effect.
Just on faith. And I got to tell a story about Paul and Faith. We used to box because they taught us how to box so we could defend ourselves like a gentleman, you know. And we had this hose that we'd make a ring and we'd time the rounds. And Paul was fighting this kid that was about 3 years older than him. I think it was Steve Yow. And Steve was beating the crap out of him. And I was trying to tell him to put your guard up and this and that. And he was really getting pounded. And he'd come back and say, I know what's the matter. I said, what? And he says, I forgot to take my vitamins. So we called timeout, and Paul went in the house and took some vitamins and came back out and smacked that kid around. It was amazing.
You know, this is very typical of a lot of the seasons there, but I remember as a kid just delighting in running down through roads like this when it was wet and just sloshing through them.
Did you have shoes on?
Yeah.
Now, speaking of boxing, did you guys already tell the story about how somebody was beating you up and then you told them that your older brother was going to beat
Yeah,
you up?
that's a good one.
Yeah,
Oh,
we gotta
yeah.
get
They
that
weren't
in.
beating me up. I was on
He was
my
threatening
bike in Logan. I was about
Talk into the microphone.
I was about 16, 17 years. I was about 17, I guess. I was on my bike, and there were these two guys that were out in the yard of the house I was passing, and one of them I recognized as he was a dropout, and he was just just a delinquent. He'd been in and out of jail, and he was a couple of 3 years older than me, and he said some really bad things about my mother. And so I turned around and went back there, and I said, "You're not going to talk to about my mother that way." And he said, "Oh yeah, you want to make something of it?" And I said, "Yeah." And so I got off my bike and we started to fight. And he didn't lay a finger on me. I just held at him all over the yard. But he had an older brother that was about 25. And then he said, "I want to fight you." And I just a 17-year-old kid, and I said, "I'm not that stupid," but I said, "I'll tell you what, I've got an older brother that will do the same to you that I did to your little brother." And he says, "Well, go get him." And I said, "Okay." I said, "You stay here. I'll be back in 10 minutes." I just lived down the road a little bit. And so I hustled off.